Hello and welcome to the Tech Guy Off the Radio live stream. Unscheduled, unprepared, everything. Just when I feel like doing it, at the time I feel like doing it. So I am delighted to spend some time with you sharing this podcast. If you like what you hear, by the way, feel free to up arrow me. If you don't like what you hear, feel free to down arrow me. This is still a free country. You're allowed to do and say what you want. It's been a little while since we've talked. I've had a lot going on. The wife has had some rather nasty post-COVID symptoms. It's been keeping her out of work, which has been keeping me busy, as you might imagine, although I've been able to spend more time with her. So a lot to talk about. Let's get to it. Oh, I want a programming note, by the way. Later on today, I will be recording my radio show for WQPH Radio 89.3 FM. It's called Your Prayer Intentions. If you have a prayer request you want included in today's in the show, when I record it, it'll be broadcast on Saturday. Just put it into the prayer wall, which I'm about to send in the chat. Just throw it onto there, and we'll be happy to include it on that show. Well, let's get straight into the topics. Topic number one is the civil war you don't want, and what people don't understand why this is a bad thing. I noticed that Glenn Reynolds' site that Michael Yon has been talking again about civil war is coming, and people don't see that civil war is coming, and people don't understand it. I want to read a little bit about this. This is at Bayou Renaissance Man at blogspot.com. I'm going to put the link in chat so that you can read it. I want to read this post and I want to comment on it a little bit to begin with, and then explain what people just do not understand, because people do not understand this. And it's huge what people are not understanding here. The post is from Monday. It's titled, Michael Yon, quote, I am warning and warning and warning that we are steaming straight into civil war. Michael Yon has become nationally known through his reporting from Iraq and Afghanistan during the first 2 decades of the 21st century. And if you haven't, by the way, if you haven't read that stuff, I don't know why I'm turning aside, because I got the article we were actually trying to go over. That's silly. But if you haven't read some of his work, words cannot adequately describe it. He's put himself into war zones and taken some big risks. So it's really good stuff. I got to keep looking at the camera instead of looking at the image. Anyways. He's generally been prescient in his predictions, despite attracting official ear for his no-holds-barred criticism of mistakes and misguided policies. He's been proven right more often than not. He foresees serious conflict in the U.S. in the immediate future. Quote, the United States is heating up. Rewind to my cautions in 2019 and especially in January 2020 about pandemic from China. Since fall of 2020, I've warned many times specifically that April 2021 will start serious violence in the United States. Witness now, it's starting. Again, some folks try to mind read and say, you predict violence because you want it. This is foolish. This is accusing a doctor of warning about smoking because the doctor wants to spread lung cancer. And I want to make a point on that statement, because this is something culturally. People, if you tell a person that something's destructive, you're doing an act of love, or as the Catholic Church would teach, a spiritual work of mercy is to admonish the sinner, because you're warning them away from something that's going to hurt them. Telling the truth is very painful for some people, and because people don't want to hear the truth a lot of times, and this is a dangerous thing. But back to the article here. I am warning and warning and warning that we are streaming straight into civil war. War sucks, to put it lightly, and it rarely turns out how anyone predicts other than bad. Many folks ask me about specific sparks. What could spark it? This is akin to asking which raindrop will cause the flood, which mosquito brought the malaria. It's about conditions. You will often hear military professionals, the serious professionals, not to be confused with careers. And by careers, he's referring to career soldiers who are basically trying to get a pension. Pardon me, I was kicking something. Talking about conditions. Medical professionals use similar language. Serious economists, too. Or wise men like Thomas Sowell. Dr. Sowell understands conditions and culture. Interesting thing about Dr. Sowell is that he's an academic. I travel far more than Dr. Sowell, but Dr. Sowell describes very accurately things I see around the world. When I see his words or hear Dr. Sowell's talk, I say, yes, this is true yet again. Dr. Sowell is very accurate. Such as the overseas Chinese thriving whenever the seed lands, but not thriving so well in China. Likewise, the Indians in India. Pre-existing conditions in the United States, conditions for eternal conflict, are increasing. But what will the spark be? Does not matter. It's about the conditions. When conditions are set, a spark will arrive. More accurately, there always are sparks, but sparks do not go far in a rainforest or a desert without fuel. It's about general health. Doctors don't try and tell us which specific germ will get us. They talk more and more about setting conditions for health, such as keeping clean, eating well, etc. Likewise, the forestry experts will talk about conditions for wildfires. Dry forest, uncleared undergrowth, no Indians managing the fuel load with traditional burns. Mr. Yon knows where, unquote, by the way. Mr. Yon knows wherefore of he speaks. Many observers, including myself, know whereof we speak because we have prior experience that makes it possible for us to judge what we're seeing around us, identify patterns in society, and know what's coming. I've tried to, on many occasions, to warn you, dear readers, that we're in for a torrid time of it. The republic founded by our forefathers is almost on its last legs. We can do nothing and watch it expire and live with the consequences, or we can resist current trends and try and get back to the solid foundations our forefathers laid for us. They're still there and they're still solid. They have not decayed. Instead, we have allowed our nation to be almost completely levered off those foundations so they no longer support it. If it comes to civil war, as Mr. Yon wants, it's our job to keep the republic back onto those foundations. It's likely to be a long, costly, and probably bloody process, but it has to be done because unless we do so, the republic will finally and terminally collapse. Forewarned is forearmed. Please conduct yourself and plan accordingly. And this is posted by someone named Peter, not me, obviously, as it's not my site. And I wanted to talk about this in a little bit because people do not understand what a war actually entails. A civil war actually entails. And I've often talked that I don't see civil war coming as much as a Lincoln County style war where you'll have targeted killings all over the place. So where basically where everything will be like the inner city where no one is safe everywhere and you just try and go about your business and hope that you're not in the wrong place at the wrong time. That is what may come. But I want to, and the best example I can give you of this stuff is to talk about things that I might do in a week. One of the things that I do regularly is I go to the supermarket, and probably you do too. Sometimes I go to a local butcher shop in Leominster since Romano's Market is no longer open. Now, the local butcher does not have cows, pigs, and chicken in his area, although there are some in parts of Massachusetts where you can go and actually get a place where to have an animal slaughtered. Their stuff comes by truck. The potato chips, the things, everything in your supermarket, from the toilet paper to the produce to everything else, comes by truck or comes by some sort of delivery. Maybe from a local warehouse, maybe from a bigger warehouse. You'll have the producer ships to a place that processes the stuff or ships directly, goes to a warehouse, gets delivered, gets distributed. Now, one of the first things that happens in a war is distribution is squeezed. And you saw a little bit with COVID when things were shut down, supermarkets were out of some things. The reason they were out of things is because you didn't have the trucks moving, you did not have the people in the supply chain. The supply chain is very fragile. If you think of just about anything you have, it's dependent. Even this mask, this old beat up mask, there's a supply chain. Someone has to make the mask. Someone has to deliver the things to the factory that makes the mask to make it. Someone has to do maintenance on the machine. Someone has to produce it. Someone has to box it. Someone has to send it to wherever it's going. And those things in a war are vulnerable. Because one of the things that Sam Rayburn, the Democrat House, the famous Democrat Speaker of the House back in the days when Democrats actually were worthwhile, would always say, we're going to try and cooperate because any jackass can kick down a barn door. It takes a carpenter to build one. It's much easier to destroy than to create. And if you disrupt those supplies, if those trucks are not going down on that street, if that interstate isn't there, if those supplies are not getting to those factories, if those supplies are not getting to the warehouses, you don't have groceries in your supermarket. You don't have these things. And most people do not produce their own food. I have some blueberry bushes out back. I have some, my wife has some strawberries that the rabbits have been getting lately. I have rabbits around. And I have my grapevines, although my wife keeps cutting them back, so they're not really cool. That's not enough to feed me and my wife for a year. It's just plain not. The reason why the United States thrives is because it produces an incredible amount of food. And it doesn't just produce the incredible amount of food, it has the ability to take that food and distribute it around the nation. If you see an Old West and you see about cattle drives, where are cattle being driven to? They're being driven to the rail line so they can be shipped to the places where they'll be slaughtered and where the meat can go out. That's why refrigeration was such a big invention, because it allowed things to go out, or canning was a big invention because it allowed meat and stuff to be distributed. It allowed it to go out there. Now, these are things we take for granted. The person, the leftist who goes online, screams about fossil fuels and then orders something from Amazon, has no concept that without those fossil fuels, they can't order from Amazon. Without those fuels, without those rail lines, without those pipelines, without these infrastructures, suddenly all that stuff they want doesn't work. Without the infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure, very easy to take out electrical infrastructure. And if people are afraid of repairing it, if people are afraid of getting shot, it's going to be very difficult to get people to go and fix it. All of these things can break down in a time of war. Americans have been very lucky. We have not had a serious war on our soil that has directly affected people for over 100 years. More like 100. You'd have to go 130 years for the Indian Wars, and a full-scale war, you have to go back to our Civil War to 1865. That's way past living memory. You don't have a whole lot of people who remember the rationing from World War II, where you had ration stamps, limited in gasoline, limited in your food, limited in what you can get, because everything was going to the front for the supply of the soldiers. We have become so rich and so powerful that people do not understand that this isn't normal. This is the thing about the culture. The prosperity of the United States, the fact that I can sit in this place and know that I can, if I want to get something to eat, I can. It's going to be there. If I want something and I don't have it, this is an Entenmann's mini cake. By the way, if you, I don't know if Entenmann's is a regional thing or a national thing. This Entenmann stuff is really good. It's a little more expensive than like a Little Debbie's, but it's really good. Worth your try. The little coffee cakes, my wife loves them. They're wonderful. But the point being that if I want that, if I have the cash to buy it, I can go get it. In fact, if I go to Market Basket, which is a 15-minute walk from my house or a 5-minute drive, I can go and buy a rotisserie chicken, fully cooked, hot, for $5. I think they're charging $4.60. A whole chicken, not a big chicken, something about this big. Easily feed 2 people, possibly feed 4. Piece of cake. What happens when those chickens aren't delivered? What happens when that infrastructure isn't there? What happens when the guy who has to deliver the truck says, I'm not going to do that? Remember what happened with the farms at the beginning of the COVID? You had animals slaughtered en masse that they had to get rid of them because they couldn't afford to stay and feed them. And even those farms, they have to get the feed for the animals. All of these things are dependent on that delivery system that has been set up, that has come. If civil war comes, that's the first thing that gets disrupted. And remember, we're not talking so much a regional situation where you have one region of the country fighting another one, because in the actual civil war, large parts of the North didn't bother them because the war wasn't fought on their soil. And at the start of the Civil War, it didn't affect certain parts of the South because the Northern armies had not reached them. But the point is, if you have a civil war, or worse, if you have a Lincoln County style war, if you don't know what the Lincoln County wars are, look it up online. If you have that, all of this gets disrupted. Now, if you lived in the 1860s, if you lived in the 1880s on the frontier where you were facing Indian attack, you knew that life was tentative and you knew that you had to be ready. But there hasn't been, I live in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. There has not been the last time Fitchburg was remotely threatened was the British expedition at the start of the Revolutionary War, where about 46 people from Fitchburg marched from here to Concord. That's April of 1775. The last time there was general warfare here was 100 years before that, where you had people taking in Indian raids and taking up to Canada. Because we do not face this danger, because we live in what has been called by Evan Sayet, who's a brilliant guy, the kindergarten of Eden, people do not understand how fragile this is. And because people are not being taught history as it was, the children don't understand. They come up thinking that that everything that's being handed to them is normal. This, by the way, is why people keep coming to this supposedly racist, sexist, bigoted place. Because they understand that where they are is worse. That they don't have, that what we have in terms of all this distribution makes life better. That's why a person doesn't mind paying a coyote to get across the border. Because they know their children will live better. But they'll only live better if the system continues to work. If there is a civil war, all those communication breakdowns that you had at the start of COVID, multiply them. That's what you're going to deal with. And a lot of people aren't going to be able to handle it. Now, there are places in certain states where there's a fair amount of food. Because remember, and this is something very important to remember, especially to all of you who deal with pathos all the time. Millions of humans over the course of life have lived without love. Millions have lived without comfort. Millions have lived without a roof over their head. None have lived without food. None have lived without water. That's just a fact of life. So you disrupt food and water, and that's a problem. People do not, and you have people who do not know how to do things. Now, technically, I mean, another great example of this is sometimes when I drive to work, there's turkeys all around the place. Once the distribution changes are gone, those turkeys are going to disappear because people are going to need them for food. Those rabbits in my backyard, if civil war comes, those rabbits are finished because I'm going to start trapping them, skinning them, and eating them. Of course, I might not have the electricity to do it, so that might be another to cook them. So that's a whole nother problem that I have to worry about. But this is the reality. Because our lives are easy, and that ease is not normal in human history, but it's normal for us. We don't get it. You're going to want to get it. And I want to pivot from that because and that's the warning about civil war, why civil war should be avoided. But there's also something going on, and that's the cold Civil War. And there was an article, I'm going to be quoting you here, that refers to a PJ Media article, which refers to a Turtle Boy article, and involves Sturbridge, Massachusetts, where I am going to be in November for Pintastic. For those of you who don't know, and I know I'm digressing, but this is something that I'm pleased about. Pintastic New England is coming back, the Pinball Festival. It's scheduled for November, the weekend before Thanksgiving. It's going to run Thursday to Sunday. And instead of being in the new, bigger location that they had planned on, and they had to cancel last year, they're going to be back at the Sturbridge House Hotel. I'm going to be there for 4 days of pinball. I strongly suggest you go there too. It'll be a great time. If you enjoy pinball, or if you've never tried it, give it a shot. I don't care what your politics are. It's fun. Enjoy yourself. Have fun. And have fun regardless of what the person next to you is thinking. Go and enjoy something that you can just enjoy for the sake of enjoying. Now, I've just put another article in chat. I want to read you this piece because this is going to get into my cold Civil War thing. This is from a site called Behind the Black, postings by Robert Zimmerman. Today's blacklisted American, any business in Massachusetts, in a Massachusetts town that does not genuflect to BLM and its Marxist agenda. And they have a picture of witches being burnt, saying, "Witch burning returns to Massachusetts." And here's the piece. The worst horror of a new leftist blacklisting that is sweeping America is how pervasive it is. This intolerance for dissent is not limited to a small amount of people leading the way, but seems to be springing upward from the movement's grassroots. That's actually very important because when average people start doing this is where it gets really dangerous. Today's blacklist story illustrates this quite starkly. Quote, in the small town of Sturbridge, Mass., which I just told you about, Pintastic, you're going to want to go, a group of 200 left-leaning citizens organized on Facebook to compile a list of businesses to avoid due to insufficient wokeness. This group even planned to present every local business with a pro-Black Lives Matter statement to sign or face a local boycott. Now, let me say something right off the top. People have a perfect right to do business with whoever they want or not to do business with somebody. People have a perfect right. If they want to live that way, that's fine. But there's consequences to doing this stuff and how you do this stuff. When the website Turtle Boy Sports published the list in full, the woman who created it, Sarah Pager, as well as the administrators of that private Facebook group, Amanda Ivory and Chelsea Ann, then apparently claimed, along with others from the group, that it was merely an internal document not meant for public viewing. And let me tell you something, one of the facts of life. Nothing on you put something on the internet, it's for public viewing, whether you think it is or not. You put something in an email, it's for public viewing, whether you think so or not. If you think that something on the internet that you write down on your computer and you send it to someplace is not going to get out, you're a fool. That's just technical experience. Let me tell you that. Back to the piece. They also justified its existence, saying it was not a blacklist, but a list of all businesses in town. It had been designed merely to record the political leanings of each, so people would know which businesses had bad political leanings and could be properly avoided. Here are some examples as noted by Turtle Boy. Quote, Carrying Company were flagged for being pro-gun, homophobic, conservative extremist, because supporting the Second Amendment means you want black people to die. The Federated Church of Sturbridge in Fiskdale, a church, not a business, was put on the list because they complained about a pride flag at the library, and it's largely their fault George Floyd died because of that. I'm actually surprised about the Federated Church of Sturbridge and Fiskdale, but that's a whole nother story. Both the Hair Gallery Salon and Spa, which, as you can see, I'll probably have no use for, and the Petrie Family Farm were blacklisted for the crime of being not progressive. Simply not being a racist person wasn't enough. You had to be liberal, too. Jimmy D's Ice Cream and Sandwich Shop, which I think I've been to. I remember the wait was long, but the food was good. And the Sturbridge Coffee House, which I believe I've been to as well, because I stay in the hotel for Pintastic, so I'll eat at some of the local places, were both added to the list for supporting cops by attending events, selling merchandise, and making Facebook posts supporting police officers, because if you support an institution that protects us from anarchy and rampant criminality, you are part of the problem now, and your business must be destroyed. I'm very curious if any of these people, by the way, If someone starts doing things in their yard, we'll be calling the cops, or we'll be calling the other people on their Facebook group, because obviously we can't call police. The Sturbridge Yankee Peddler, which I've driven by a few times, I've never stopped at, was targeted for harassment because they were owned by a Trump supporter in a town where 40% of the people voted for Donald Trump. Now, remember, this is Massachusetts. There's a fair amount of people who voted for Trump in Massachusetts, nowhere near enough to win, but there's a fair amount. Sturbridge is also surrounded by towns that voted for Trump and is located in one of the most conservative parts of the state, but they had to be destroyed because they killed George Floyd. The thrift gypsy used the racial slur in their name, even though that's not a racial slur and gypsies are real. I've heard of that shop. I don't think I've ever been there. Treehouse Brewery and Wildflower Palashes, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, got a pass because they were owned by a liberal and pro-Democrat, while Jones & Jones Realty, Crispy Crunchy Chicken, ooh, that sounds good, I've never been there, and Oodles of Doodles were exempt for harassment because they were owned by Sturbridge Against Racism members. Unquote. What's important to note is that the list was created by Prager. She did it as part of a 200-member private Facebook group, all apparently eager to squelch and destroy anyone who dare to hold an opinion they do not like. For years, I had believed that most decent Democrats were simply unaware of how corrupt and extremist their party had become, and if presented with evidence that showed this fact to them, they would quite justifiably be horrified and either leave that party or make a stick to force change. I no longer believe that. I sadly now think that a very large plurality of Democrat Party supporters, maybe even a majority, now enthusiastically endorse the bigoted Marxist anti-white agenda of the corrupt Democrat Party and its leftist allies like Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And of those who do not, they are so easily led that they are willing to let these jackbooted thugs control the agenda so that the lives of anyone who opposes them are destroyed. You might want to ask some of the Democrats you know what they think of this and the intolerant blackballing against the party that now supports. I think you'll find yourself quite appalled at how many are willing to accept, excuse, and justify or endorse it. And they probably do. So part of it that will be out of fear. But this is the thing, and this is the part of that people don't understand when I'm talking about the cold Civil War. Now, people, as I said, via the right of association, these people are perfectly within their rights to not do business with somebody over their political views if they don't want to. Like I do not buy Newman's own salsa, not because I think it was bad. It was pretty good actually, but they donate part of the proceeds to Planned Parenthood, and I'm not a member of Catholics for Mortal Sin, like this administration is. And by the way, just as an FYI, I do not, when I refer to the administration, the style book of the Tech Guy blog says we do not say Joe Biden. We say the Biden administration, because Joe Biden is no more president of this country than I am. Let's say it bluntly. He is legally the president. Even if the audits turn out that it was stolen, he is still legally the president. But he is no more in charge of this country than I am. So let's say it bluntly so that people can hear it. And I mean, I'm probably too small to get banned by YouTube at this point, but who cares? Because you know what? If I'm not on YouTube, I'll play my baseball game. I play my Dynasty baseball. I have a life. Or I do something around the house. I don't care. I mean, I will miss you guys who watch the podcast and enjoy it, and who occasionally will put something in chat, but I've got life. The pictures behind me of my family and so forth, I've got life. I got things that I can do. That it's not this. But the point is that this is where this gets dangerous. Once you start mistrusting people, now let's say you're not in a town you don't know. You're going to go to eat. What if the person's a Trump? What if you're a liberal? Now you're wondering, what if the person's a Trump supporter? What if the person knows that you're a liberal? Can you trust them to cook you the food? Will they spit in your food? Will you even know if they do it? What if you have to take your car to a mechanic? What if the mechanic thinks different than you politically? Will they fix your brake lines properly? Will they hope that you get into an accident? What about your doctor? Will a doctor of a different political thing prescribe the wrong medicine? That's where you can be heading. You do not understand this. If you believe in this stuff, if you think that you can if you want to this is segregation. If you want to segregate your businesses and saying, I do not trust this restaurant to make me my food, because once you reach that point, you're not going to trust people. You only trust certain people to restaurants. And I've reached the point now, frankly, where I go to restaurants I know and like. I don't like to go to new places anymore because I'm reaching the point where I don't trust the left. I don't want to be paranoid about what I'm eating. I don't want to be paranoid about who's fixing my car and if they'll have a grudge against me because I have the Catholic radio station on my thing. Because this has become, remember, this is the post-Christian society. When the parties were not divided by religion, and they are, actual believing Christians are generally on the right these days, which is unhealthy in several ways. But the point being that politics has become the religion for these people. People are naturally religious. And they've glammed onto this like a religion. And like a religion, they have not, and their religion is not very kind to heretics. Not very kind at all. So the problem is this creates paranoia in everything you do. Do you want to live with that paranoia? Do you want to wonder if the guy fixing your car is really going to fix your car properly if they're of a different political stripe? Do you want to wonder about your doctor? Do you want to worry about the nurse who's treating you? Do you want to worry about all of these things? And again, remember what I talked to you earlier about distribution and such. We are not living in a society where people do things themselves, where people are off the grid. That's not what's going on anymore. We're a society that's dependent on each other, and we're a society that is not segregated by opinion. I mean, even in the deepest red state, let's say a state of 1 million people, a red state, that only 20% of the people voted for Joe Biden. That'd be 200,000 people. Let's say a blue state with 1 million people and only 20% voted for Trump. That's 200,000 people. Do you have any idea what that is? That's a lot of people. And it doesn't take a lot of people to make trouble. And most people really don't want trouble. They want to be left alone. One of the reasons why the left has gotten as far as it has and the things that they're involved in is because most people in the right, they want to be left alone to live their lives. We proselytize, like I'm a Catholic. I proselytize my religion because I believe my religion is right. If you don't want it, that's on you. I'm not going to push it on you. I'll make the sale. But if you don't want to hear it, I'll walk away. Not my soul. But the point is, if you live only for that, bad things are going to happen. The reason why America works is because we don't have this. And all I can think of is, if you didn't get a chance, if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find a series of things called Interview with Immigrants. And I had an interview with a woman named Maria. And Maria talked about why she came to America is because during the interview, we talked about, I work in a place where most of the people are Spanish. In fact, when there was a company meeting a couple of days ago to announce a change in management, they had it first in Spanish and then in English. And everyone was there for the Spanish meeting. And when the English-only speakers were left to be explained it to, there were 5 of us. We were outnumbered like 7 or 8 to 1 easy, or 10 to 1. That's the type of place I work in. Well, I had noticed a while back that sometimes when women were going back from break, they would have their arms locked. And I thought it was just a cultural thing. And Maria explained to me that where they were, the ladies would lock their arms so that someone couldn't be grabbed. And she had been visiting a sister in Leominster, Massachusetts, which is the city next to ours. And she was near this pond, and there were a couple of strange guys walking near. And it suddenly occurred to her that she wasn't afraid, which was very unusual for her. She decided, this is how I want to live. I want to not be afraid. So that's why she came to America. The idea that there are people who want to stop that disgusts me. But they want to stop that because they don't realize what they have. It's really the story of the prodigal son. What's been going on right now is the story of the prodigal son. For those of you who do not know the story of the prodigal son, which is one of the parables of Christ, he talks about a rich man had two sons. One of them said to him, Father, I want my share of their inheritance now. The father decides to do it, divides his property amongst them. Guy goes away, blows everything on women, wine, women, and song. And then after a short time has nothing. Then there's a famine. He has to hire himself out to pig farmers. And he says to himself, I'm living here. I got nothing to eat here. I wishes he could eat what the pigs are eating. But back in my father's house, my servants are living better than me. In other words, he did not realize what he had until he lost it. American children, American people, American being taught that America is so horrible. They do not realize what we have, and they're not going to realize it until it's gone. It doesn't have to be gone. Now, what's sad is this is actually what happens to republics in general. If you look at history, this is what happens, which is why history was taught to warn people away from this. When we stop teaching history, that's what's going to happen. In fact, I'm thinking of doing a series of podcasts where I've got some old history books that are 100 years old. I collect history books because the best way to understand a culture is to read their histories and to read what they taught. And I'm going to, not right away, but sometime in the next couple of months, I'm going to do either a weekly or a monthly podcast where I read a chapter from one of these history books, and you'll be able to use these. You'll be able to use these things for homeschooling and such, and this will be word from word, chapter at a time from these books. There's essential reading in ancient history, essential in modern history, and that modern history goes up to like 1902. It's kind of weird to read a book that says the Romanov family that's still in charge in Russia today. But these are things that grade school people or high school people were supposed to know. And there was a reason why people wanted them to know it. They wanted them to understand. They don't understand this. And this is the thing. And what I'd like to say on this is this. It falls into the next topic, which is the Cui Bono, which is who benefits. The question becomes, who benefits from all this division? Who gets something from it? And again, I'm going to go. Oh, that's funny. That's gone. Oh, that's in trash because I'm sorry. I was just checking the blog I noticed a comment that was repetitive that had been trashed and I hadn't gotten rid of. And I want to bring up something I saw at Instapundit. And let me see if I can find it. Oh, that's nice. Federal Court of Appeal sides with Christian student group in case against University of Iowa. Oh, that looks interesting, but that's not what I wanted to talk about. Hey, there was a thing about the cartels going wild that I want to read you about. And let's see if I can find the post that was from a couple of hours ago. There's a line from Glenn Reynolds here that's worth repeating. Around the world, mass immigration is only popular with the political elite. The reader will be left to contemplate why this might be. And again, all of that is about who benefits. Cui Bono. Who gets things out of this? And one of the things that it's been was pointing out is that the cartels were having a field day. And I'm for some reason, I can't find the piece. Let me see if I can find just the word cartel. CART. Oh, here it is. Crisis by design. Border shock. 18-wheelers unloaded migrants and drugs, and cartels are having a field day. That's a link to a piece at the Washington Examiner. And I'm going to tweet out. This is by Paul Bedard. I'm going to put the piece in chat. And the question becomes, who benefits? The Biden administration getting power, the Biden administration doing all of these things that seemingly hurt Americans. Who benefits? Here's a little bit from the piece. Mexican crime cartels, never seeing the new U.S. border so inviting as it been under President Joe Biden, are openly driving to the border with tractor trailers full of illegal immigrants and drugs to unload their cargo, according to a new report. For the first time, 18-wheelers are stopping at the Rio Grande to dump their cargo to the poorly defended Big Bend areas of West Texas as cartels shop for new crossing points. It's never been this busy, one agent told Don Bernstein of the Center for Immigration Studies. He's been on the border charting the impact of Biden's border and opening policies dubbed La Invitación by illegal immigrants. Bentman wrote in a new report, quote, 18-wheeler tractors, trailer rigs, and trucks of all sizes now pull right up to the river in an unending succession to unload people and drug cargo in broad daylight along the long, empty stretches of the riverside territory. Police chases of immigrant transport vehicles are now commonplace in towns further inland for the first time, and Border Control agents, largely unreinforced despite new circumstances, are chasing groups through the desert day and night, losing most and strained beyond capacity to impact. That's what's happening, they say. Now, let me tell you something about these things. This stuff is done for a reason. This stuff isn't just being done for fun. It's being done for a reason. And what is that reason? Who benefits? Well, China benefits, for one. If a weakened United States means that China has a freer hand, China benefits. Who else benefits? The people who get the kickbacks. Now, let me explain something, because we've talked about this in the past. One of the reasons why the federal government is so happy to give money to places like Planned Parenthood is because a percentage of that money gets kicked back to the people who are voting them that money. Those Democrat polls, those squish Republican polls, they will get contributions from Planned Parenthood. They will get awards which come with cash benefits from Planned Parenthood. They will have relatives and friends hired. Lobbyists will when lobbyists push, like, this is the thing about the Green New Deal and green energy. And actually, it's worth bringing up. I want to bring up something, because a great example of this is a piece that was on Powerline that I linked to. And in fact, I'm going to read you one of my own pieces, which has this. And let me bring it up. Loose thoughts. This is a piece from my own site. Powerline on green energy, unclear on the goal. And there's the link, and the link to my site also has this piece also has the link to the original Powerline piece. So if you want to read that, it's in there. There's a rather excellent piece at Powerline blog about the reasons why green energy is doomed to fail. The bottom line in his piece is that land use and the infrastructure to bring the energy from where it's generated to the NYMBY folk, not in my backyard folk, who want energy but not the infrastructure, is dramatic to say the least. Quote, when green advocates tabulate the costs of wind and solar, they generally don't include the thousands of miles of transmission lines that are required to bring electricity from the rural areas that are stuck with green development to the urban areas where the electricity is used. And that's another thing I talked about, Civil War, power disruption. If those power lines get hit, you don't have electricity. And even if you have a generator, if those trucks aren't rolling, you don't have fuel for that generator. Think about that for a second. Connecting lots of wind and solar to the grid also requires appropriating land for transmission projects. According to the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, converting the domestic electric grid to run on renewables will require doubling the amount of high voltage transmission capacity that's in the U.S. At present, the U.S. has about 240,000 miles of high voltage transmission. Just to give you an idea of how much that is, the Earth's circumference is 25,000 miles. Therefore, renewables conversion means adding enough high voltage transmission lines to circle the Earth about 10 times. The piece in the report it cites is excellent. However, there's one glaring error that I would like to point out, and it's an error in terms of premise. The premise of the piece is that green energy is doomed to failure. However, that is incorrect. Not because it won't provide the energy needs that it claims, it won't, but because the goal of green energy is not to provide energy, but to provide cash. From the piece, quote, "So why does the green dream persist? In part, it's because it's inflicted on our children from elementary school on, but mostly because there's a great deal of money in it. This chart shows the volume of U.S. tax incentive per unit of energy produced for various energy sources. And this thing, U.S. energy-related tax incentives per unit of energy produced in 2018, dollars per EJ. Nuclear, $13,157,895. Hydrocarbons, $46,920,821. Production tax credit, wind, $2,073,170,732. Investment tax credit, solar, $3,333,333,333. The source for that is the Congressional Research Service. And just to give you an idea about that, I've just finished my taxes yesterday. Now, I actually have a rule with my taxes. I do my taxes, I let them sit a week, and then I go through them again to check for errors. I actually found two things that were missing, a deduction I missed, and I calculated a deduction wrong, so my taxes were actually higher, but that's why I let them sit, because I do them all myself. I do them on paper. And one of the things that I was doing is I was going through the tax forms, and on page 3, the schedule is the various tax credits. It doesn't say what the credits are for, it just always page numbers. So I brought up each of those forms because you never know if you're eligible for the credit. And there were all kinds of credits for solar and wind and all these renewable things that I could have grabbed if I did all that stuff. So they're basically giving away money. Back to the article. Green energy holds political sway, which has made a relative handful of people, largely non-Americans and lobbyists, immensely wealthy, while impoverishing utility ratepayers and taxpayers. That is to say, the rest of us. Unquote. And here's the bottom line. Green energy is all about the green. That is all about the green that the lobbyists can get from U.S. taxpayers for their clients, and the political kickbacks in terms of both contributions and jobs for the connected and their families in these industries, all paid for by you. If you remember that this is the actual goal, to grease the connected at the taxpayer expense, rather than produce clean power for the public, then green energy not only hasn't failed, but has succeeded beyond its wildest dreams. And that's the thing about Cui Bono. If you are thinking that the Biden administration's moves on immigration, on fracking, on pipelines, on China, on Iran, if you think of them as what is the best thing for the United States, then they're miserable failures. But if you think of them in terms of what will get me kickbacks, what will reward my political friends, what will give me wealth and power if I'm connected, then they're spectacular successes. When your goal is yourself, when you don't give a care about what happens to somebody else, and your goal is just to milk the system for yourself, the philosophy is very different. When you don't give a care about someone else, and this is why Christianity cuts in. When you have a post-Christian country, remember, the Christian is taught, love your enemies, and love not in terms of love and emotion, but love is in an action. When you are removed from the need to love your enemies, then you don't mind exploiting people. And when we had a Christian society, even those who actually had these same values that didn't want that or just out for themselves, paid lip service or hid it to some degree because they were trying to do that while still having access. To have access to steal, they had to do enough lip service to the principles of Christianity in order to get a chance to steal. Now they don't have to bother. Now that's why this stuff has become so open, because the need and the desire to pretend to give a care is gone. They think they don't have to fake it anymore, which is why they don't fake it anymore. Kind of sad, really. All right, let's go. And so whenever you see something from the Biden administration, ask yourself who benefits. Who is going to get ahead? When you see Democrat cities, who benefits? That's what's going on. Now, our next topic, I referred to the steal of the election and so forth, and there's audits going on now. There's audits going on in New Hampshire. The New Hampshire audit is actually very big, and I want to talk about that a little bit. But the audit that's going in Arizona is important. Now, there's one thing I want to point out about the audit in Arizona that people may not understand. This audit, even if this audit and audits reveal that Arizona and other states have been stolen, will not change the result of the election. It will reveal that it's been stolen, but it will not change the result because this went through the courts legally. This is, by the way, why I had my big split. I used to talk with a liberal called Brown Sugar 3939, Maxine Baptiste, which I used to have on my radio show as a pundit from the left. I don't bother to talk with her. I don't bother to listen to her. I don't deal with her on Twitter anymore. And the reason I did was during the election and stuff, I said bluntly, I am willing to say right now that I will abide by what the courts say. Will you vow to do the same? And she said, no, because they're not going to rule against me. I won't make that promise. In other words, she was only committed to deferring to the courts if the court said what they wanted. So this is why I don't bother with people like this anymore, because there's no point. If they're going to run by a different set of rules, I'm not going to debate with them. I'm not going to waste my time. My life is too short for this. I'm not going to worry about it. But what's going on in Arizona, the audit there, I'm of two minds of that. At Citizen Free Press, I noticed that the Democrat Party did not put up the $1 million necessary for the bond to delay the vote a little bit. Now, they're trying to delay because after a certain date, then they're allowed to destroy the ballots, which they want to do. But I must say, in the back of my head, I mean, Democrats there's no way they couldn't come up with that $1 million if they really need it. There's plenty of liberals out there who could kick in privately. And the fact that they weren't willing to do that is in the back of my mind that the fix is in. But it's all about stalling. The reason why it's all about stalling is because of the movie The Quiet Man. And I don't remember if I mentioned this in my last podcast, but it's worth repeating. Movie Quiet Man, classic movie. You'll see it on every St. Patrick's Day. John Wayne, Maureen O'Hara, and so forth. It's about a boxer who goes to live in Ireland after he accidentally kills someone in the ring, falls in love with a girl. He won't fight for her dowry, I should say. She's insulted by it. He doesn't reveal to them. He doesn't want people to know that he killed someone in the ring, so he hasn't shared this. And at the end of the movie, there's this scene where all the various people in the movie are kind of bowing for the camera type of thing. And you see John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara waving to the camera, and Maureen O'Hara whispers something in his ear. He does a gigantic double take. And she gets this mischievous smile, and he just kind of follows her to their little cottage, and the movie ends as if something's going on. Well, the reason why he reacted that way wasn't because he was acting, but because the director, John Fuld, told Maureen O'Hara, I want you to say a particular thing. And the particular thing was vulgar and sexual. I want you to whisper this in John Wayne's ear. Now O'Hara said, I'm not going to do that. Said, no, I'm the director. I'm ordering you. I want you to do this. We're not going to tell John because I want his reaction. I want that reaction from him. And he says, she said, I will commit to doing this on one condition, that you vow that it will never be revealed what I've said. Now, obviously, they couldn't get Wayne's promise before Wayne because he didn't know it was coming. Ford made the promise. And then after the fact, Wayne agreed as well. So she does the thing. Now, for decades, people have speculated what she whispered in his ear. I have my own ideas of what she might have said, but that's beside the point. Well, John Ford died in 1976. Wayne died in 79. And Maureen O'Hara died like 3 years ago. And over again, they would ask her on interview shows, what was said. And at one point, I think Larry King did this. He said, will you tell me the thing? Could you whisper it? And she blinks to him. Larry, can you keep a secret? And she said, yes, so can I. And the secret died with her. And that was possible because there were only 3 people who knew the secret. And as I've mentioned before, the steal of this election, and yes, I'm saying it's stolen bluntly, whether people like it or not. YouTube wants to ban. You want to ban me? Go ahead, ban me. I don't give a damn. The giveaway was the stopping of the count of the votes in the 5 different cities, because no one city wanted to. There's no point in stealing one state if you don't get all the states that you needed to steal the election. So in other words, there were lots of people involved, and you're not going to be able to permanently keep that secret, which is why they did procedural to get things off. Somebody was talking. I had commented on Twitter today about, I put out a tweet concerning another thing that had dropped. Mike Chenovich put out, as it now stands, the only person killed on January 6th was the unarmed female Pops Trump supporter. The bear spray story has also collapsed in court, and it shows a link to a piece about how another claim that had been reported widely had been dropped. And I tweeted out, odd how the left's narrative seemed to collapse when actual evidence is required in court rather than being achieved on procedural grounds. And somebody tweeted back, oh, like narratives like Stop the Steal? And that made my point, because all the Stop the Steal stuff in court was stopped by procedural grounds. They didn't bother to review this. The fact that this election was stolen is going to come out. The real question is, when is it going to come out? Is it going to come out before election 2024? Is it going to come out before election 2022? When is it going to come out? It's in the left's interest to delay that as long as possible, which is why they're stalling on the audit that's going on in Arizona. The audit in New Hampshire is more important. And that's because that audit had nothing to do with the presidential race. A Democrat, and this is actually rather amusing, a Democrat wanted an audit because they were down by like 30 votes. And because they presumed that, all this stuff about fiddling around with the election was just BS, they had no problem. We'll audit this. And what they discovered was that every Republican candidate in this town had 300 votes taken away from them automatically by the machines. And this is a problem. And that's just one town. If there's 100 towns in New Hampshire, that could be that's thousands of votes. There's a reason why Donald Trump didn't win New Hampshire in 2016, and that's because there was a Senate race that was necessary to steal. That's the reason. There's a reason why there's 2 Democrat senators from New Hampshire. And if this audit proves that was wrong there, and the governor, who is a bit of a rhino and an anti-Trump guy, has been saying, oh, this is confined to one city. If this is revealed in that city, then they're going to start. The question, will they start auditing other cities? Will New Hampshire require audits? Because I have a funny feeling that this is much bigger and has been going on much longer than people realize. I think the fix has been in for a while, but I think people allowed the fix to be in certain cities. We'll let you steal your city. Don't try and do something in our district. That's my thought. I could be dead wrong. It's possible that I'm dead wrong about all of this. I fully concede that that's possible. But that's what I think is happening. This is all about stalling. And they're going to keep stalling because they do not want. The longer they can delay it, the more they can do, the more they can grab. That's the real reason why they needed Trump out, was because people weren't getting greased. People weren't getting greased. It's all about getting greased. It's all about getting your cut. Remember in the movie Goodfellas, how everyone was getting a piece of the stuff that was stolen? Everyone was getting a part of the payoff. That's what this is all about. That's what DC is about. Everybody getting a bit of a payoff. Now I want to talk about the final thing, and this is about not just the Derek Chauvin verdict, but about what's happening. I remember seeing a couple of days ago on a site on Twitter, and I don't really spend a lot of time on Twitter. I have it open in the background because, I have, like I said, I have a life. And it was talking about how Black-owned businesses are saying they want more police protection in Minnesota in the George Floyd Memorial District. And my tweet out there was sowing, meat reaping. And people saying, well, that's not fair. That's not fair. I think it's extremely fair. We still live in a republic. In fact, every state is guaranteed a Republican form of government. And that's when republic actually meant representative of the people, not Republican versus Democrat. And it's reaching a point where police are retiring in droves. People are getting out of things. They're trying to pay more to get police. I've just kicked that, so it's moving this, the camera. And I'm sitting back because I need to sit back a little bit. I'm getting old. You got to remember, I'm an old man. I'm not old retirement old, but I'm starting to get there. Oh, that's why I hooked my foot on the wire. Silly me. So, anyways, police are bailing out. And they're bailing out because they know that going into these districts, trying to do these things, is a recipe for trouble. Because there are actually hundreds of people shot by police every day. And that's because this is a rather big country. There are, I think, 341 or 441 towns in Massachusetts. And I'm in a small state. Multiply that by 50. You're talking 20, 30,000 towns and cities all over this country. They're bad people. There are plenty of bad people in the world. And the contract with police is that we outsource our violence to them. We agree that we're not going to just shoot people randomly in the streets. I'm not going to get a rope. If someone tries to rob me, I'm not going to get a rope and hang a guy who tries to rob me or harm me or shoot him down in the street. The social compact is I'm going to let this police force take care of this. Unless my life is in immediate danger, then I'll kill them. But we outsource this violence. The violence necessary to protect ourselves. And it's a hard thing. You can't imagine what a police officer goes through. Because you're in danger every moment of the day. And any moment, you could have to kill somebody. Either to save a life or to protect your own. That's a lot of stress. I don't see how any police officer has hair. I just don't. And now police are being demonized. We already told you about the story out of Sturbridge. But the Black community is letting themselves be played by the Democrats, and they've let it go on for a very long time, which amazes me that they're doing this. And that they are creating a disincentive for police to police in their areas, which means that they're going to be victimized. Because a police officer is not going to put themselves at risk. They are going to wait until after the fact and then write a report. Because they don't want to be the next Derek Chauvin. And the Chauvin trial was a joke. Now, by a joke, I mean this. I want to clarify something. You could legitimately conclude from the evidence that he should have been convicted. There are people just hearing the evidence who could have come to that conclusion. You could have also have concluded from the evidence that he was innocent. Either of those verdicts would have been completely legitimate. But when you have people who are worried about, and these jurors weren't even sequestered. When you have people worrying about whether or not there's going to be riots and violence and rioting again, you can't have a fair trial. You just can't. And the fact that people didn't mind this, people were willing to let it happen, meant that they weren't willing to do the heavy lifting to stop it. Once you stop paying the Dane Guild, you never get rid of the Dane. Once you stop paying the Black Lives Matter people, they may be able to get their own mansions, but you're paying them forever. Now that it's cause and effect. The police officers are not going to put themselves in it. They'll go to other departments. Other parts of the state and other states are going to become much safer because these people will get jobs in other states. They're experienced police officers. Then they're going to be treated right. To give you an idea of how pervasive this is and how bad this is, it's not a lot of trouble in my town, although I dislike the fact that somebody has painted a Black Lives symbol on what's called the Rock, and it really annoys me that it's up there. It makes me feel like I'm in an occupied town. I mean, it's better than the Planned Parenthood. If I had the choice between that on the Rock or seeing the Planned Parenthood in town, I'd rather see that because Planned Parenthood represents daily murder. But there was a police officer. I do something called Eucharistic adoration, which Catholics will know what it is. Non-Catholics will not. You can look it up. I'm not going to explain in detail, but I was at my church, and I was leaving. It was about 12 o'clock, and there was a police car parked. There had been police there earlier in the day, and this was basically the station they were being parked at, so they could be dispatched. And obviously, if someone's speeding, they can nail us and so forth. And I noticed a police officer over there alone, and I walked over to her. And then again, this police officer doesn't know me from Adam. I could be dangerous. I could have had a gun. Could have been anything. But I walked over to this policewoman who was in the car, and I said, I just wanted to say, I know you guys are having a hard time these days and getting beat up by the press. And I want you to know, don't let it get you down. Don't get discouraged. There are plenty of people who actually care about you and want you to and appreciate you. She was so grateful. She was like, oh my God. It was almost embarrassing how grateful she was. I thought she was going to break out in tears. And remember, she's not in a place where there's trouble, and she's feeling that. How do you think the average police officer in these cities are feeling? As long as you reward with re-election, with contracts, with support, the people who are going to exploit you. And remember what I said earlier about Cui Bono. Who benefits from this? Who is getting the corporate dollars? The corporate dollars that are going to these organizations. People are getting paid for it. They're not going to you, to your town. It's all about paying off activists. If you reward this behavior, you're going to get more of it. And I got to say, I feel bad in a sense. It's bad. It's sad that it's happened. I wish it was not happening. But I got to tell you something else. It's the end result of the bad decisions being made. If you make bad decisions, bad things are going to happen to you. I'll feel bad. I'll feel a little bit of pity for you when these bad things happen. But it's not unjust. And it's actually very Christian in the sense that one of the things that Christ said to Saint Faustina in her various visions was, from the divine mercy thing, was that I desire mercy. Those who do not accept my mercy will get my justice. It's mercy or justice. Pick Christ's mercy, Christ's justice. Pick one. And it's a sad thing when someone faces the justice of God, not having received the mercy, not desiring the mercy. But it's not unjust because the mercy was offered and turned it down. Same thing here. And there's also a misconception that's worth mentioning here. Back the blue and support the police. And the police are responsible to follow the law and should be held accountable if they break it. Are not mutually exclusive. The people who back the blue like myself, also expect the police to follow the law and to be prosecuted if they don't. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Those go hand in hand. Because John Adams once said, public business has to be done by someone. If it's not done by honest people, it'll still be done by someone. It's a word to that effect. I don't think that's an exact quote. Policing is going to be done by someone. And I have a nasty suspicion that the left wants that policing done by their thugs. And I think you're going to see that. I think that's the end game. Furthermore, I wouldn't be surprised if lots of these the property in these cities is being bought up cheap by somebody. Again, cui bono, who benefits? If the people are if your community is not getting proper police protection and you're voting for the left, that's on you. And I'm not going to have I'm going to say it's sad, but it's justice. It's sad, but it's justice. Now, if those votes are being stolen, perhaps, maybe we should audit the vote in those cities and see if people have actually been voting for this stuff. That would be interesting. But that's a conversation for another day. Well, I've gone on here for about an hour and 12 minutes. Hope you liked what you heard. If you like it, up arrow us. If you really like it, share it with your friends. Maybe share it with your enemies. Maybe they'll become friends, or maybe they'll become my enemies. Who knows? Then I'll have to pray for them. That's actually very hard. You can't believe how hard it is to pray for my enemies sometimes. It's not likable. It's not enjoyable, but that's the rules. If you really, really like it, then please consider hitting the tip jar. With my wife out of work right now, it would really help. But either way, I hope you enjoyed what we did. When will I be doing this again? Probably not again this week, but possibly next week. I've been going to daily mass lately. And I'll be talking about that sometime in the future, probably in about a month or so, because I'm working on a project that's going to eat up a lot of my time. Might be back next week, might be back the week after. No idea what day. As a general rule, just for those of you who are curious, you won't see the podcast on Monday because I have adoration. Adoration makes it a thing. Normally, you wouldn't see it on a Wednesday because I have to record the radio show, but I was up very early today. So if I had to bet on a day for the podcast, it's usually going to be like Thursday or Friday. But today I was up early, so I figured Wednesday worked. But if you really like the podcast and want it back, email me, put posts in there, and I'll tell you what. If you really desperately want a podcast, if I see a $100 tip jar hit from somebody, I will schedule an actual podcast. If between today is April 28th, if I see a $100 tip jar hit in my tip jar between now and, let's see, today's the 28th, and May 8th, VE Day. I'm not saying May 7th because I have to bring my car to the garage May 7th to get. Actually, no, May 7th is a Friday. We'll say by the car goes into the shop the 5th. Let's say May 6th. If I see a $100 tip jar hit by the 6th of May, I will actually do a scheduled podcast, and we'll do it. In fact, I'll make that deal general. If you want a podcast, you want me to do an hour, somebody kicks in $100, I'll do it. It'll be worth my time to schedule it because I'm greedy. I'm capitalist. Capital risk and reward. Who benefits? I benefit if I get $100. So I think that's a fair price. If I'm not worth it, that's fine too, because that's also capitalism. If I produce something that's worthwhile, people will pay for it. If I'm not producing something worthwhile, people won't. But I hope you enjoyed what you've seen. Again, you can find this at the blog. You can find this at the website. Please share it if you like it. Please, and feel free to critique it if you don't, because if If you don't like it, if I'm not doing it well, I need to know about it. Again, thank you for your time. You have a great rest of the day, and God bless. And just a reminder, I will be recording the radio show, Your Prayer Intentions, probably, see, it's 10:54. Probably should have some lunch, take about a half hour to do the show, because I have an interview I already did that I'm going to do the show around, and I have those prayer intentions. I'll probably get it done around 1 o'clock, because I have to leave for work by 2:45, 10 minutes of 3. So you get a prayer intention in by then, I'll include it in the show. I've already put the first link that's in the chat room is the WQPH prayer wall. So you can use that to send me your prayer requests. If you have a private request, you don't want to put the details, just send private. Again, thanks for your time. Have a great rest of the day, and may God bless each and every one of you. Take care. And we're done.